I think the patriarchy and male headship of at least the Western American church has gotten a bit more into my brain than I realized. And I didn't figure that out until this morning as I was typing, because I gave serious consideration to entirely skipping the New Testament women referenced today. Why? Because I've told their story. It's a pattern. It's something that we've talked about multiple times. And then it dawned on me as I sat down to type that is precisely the reason to tell these stories. The stories of women like Prisca, who is Priscilla, same thing, and Claudia are repeatedly breezed through or ignored altogether. And to combat that, it is my job, it is your job, to fight it, to fight that pattern with an overt repetition. If you've been with me on this ride for a while, which, by the way, officially today is the halfway point for the year, then you might already know what's coming. I will tell you that what's coming when we reference the Old Testament passage for today is new and different. So I'm going to encourage you to stick with me. And as we go through these New Testament women, I'm going to challenge you to make your plan of how you're going to keep repeating these stories so that they are heard and known. Whether Paul is the writer of 2 Timothy or if it is someone else writing in his stead to kind of complete his work after his death, what we see in the mention of Claudia and Priscilla is the continuation of the familiar narrative that the early church of Jesus was filled with followers who continued his embrace, Jesus's embrace, of the full inclusion and participation of women in the life of the church. As was his pattern, Paul closed this particular letter, or whomever, with a series of greetings, and he sends these greetings to Prisca, Priscilla, depending on your translation, and Aquila. In listing Priscilla first, before her husband, he reiterates that Priscilla is recognized for who she is, what she does, how she supports and grows the church, regardless of her husband's role. They may be the original co-pastorate, and that's a beautiful thing. What Paul is doing subtly, maybe overtly, I don't know what his readers understood, is he's saying, I see her and I recognize her contribution, and I know that she is called to do the work that she's doing, and so I'm going to support her. And one of the ways he supports her is by naming her. Claudia is then included in a list of people to whom Paul is not sending greetings, but from whom Paul is delivering greeting. After a lengthy list of deserters, read earlier in the chapter, the writer concludes the letter with a list of people who are there with him, supporting him through ways unlisted, but that likely included presence, prayer, meeting of basic needs. Claudia is important to Paul, as are the others listed. She is named. And as we know by now, the naming is significant. So many women in Scripture remain unnamed. Can we have a naming party for them? Seriously, this is something I'm seriously considering. That when a woman is named, we need to take notice. She is seen and uplifted and recognized as a member of Paul's inner circle. If you've read faith doesn't erase grief, then you already know my thoughts on Hannah's prayer to God in the first chapter of 1 Samuel. Her release of grief and how well that served her. Today we're looking through a different lens. Today's text comes from 1 Samuel 2, but we need the background provided in 1 Samuel 1. Hannah is married to Elkanah, who is also married to Peninnah. And Elkanah was a man of faith who made yearly trips for worship and sacrifice. Now, I'm sure Hannah and Peninnah didn't have a great relationship at home, but the writer of 1 Samuel is clear to include that especially on these trips, their relationship, the negative aspects of it, was highlighted. You see, Peninnah had children and Hannah did not. In Hannah's time and culture, this was a disgrace and to some, even a sign of failure or sin. It also meant Elkanah treated Hannah differently, in such overt ways as giving more of a portion of the sacrificial meat to Peninnah than to Hannah because of the children. And you know who didn't miss that detail? Peninnah. The exact words from 1 Samuel 1, verses 6 through 7 are these. So Peninnah would taunt Hannah and make fun of her because the Lord had kept her from having children. Year after year, it was the same. Peninnah would taunt Hannah as they went to the tabernacle. Each time, Hannah would be reduced to tears and would not even eat. That is the New Living Translation. Peninnah is the original mean girl, right? Now, when Hannah's story is preached from a pulpit, the storylines are either her incredible faith to dedicate the son she longed for to the Lord, or her demonstration of taking all of her cares to God, or maybe the foreshadowing of Mary's beautiful prayer of thanks for Jesus. Hannah's prayer of longing is celebrated, and that makes sense. But to do Hannah justice, to truly see her, we must pause and consider the fullness of her distress. It isn't solely that she is a wife yet to have a child. It isn't solely that she also endures watching her husband's other wife birth multiple children. It isn't solely the questions of identity that follow from her not having children, especially when raised on stories like that of Leah and Rachel, as she would have been. All of that is a lot. And sadness and depression, praying to God for relief are natural and understandable, appropriate responses. But those are not the sole cause of Hannah's pain. Every year Hannah trekked with her family, and every year she did so knowing the taunting and humiliation that awaited her from Peninnah, and the silence that hung thick in the air from her husband. It distressed her to the point of not eating. This is bullying. It is the one who clings to the outward appearance of success and then acts out and shows their own insecurities. That is a bully. Unfortunately, the one on the receiving side often cannot see the bully for who they are because of the inflicted pain. And that was Hannah's experience. So fast forward. Finally, Hannah has a son, and she keeps him home to wean him for around 3 years, during which time she ceases her annual trips with the family, soaking up as much time as possible because she knows what is coming next. And then, as she knew that it would, the time arrives. Because of the vow she made to God, her precious Samuel would not make the return trip home with the rest of the family. Hannah could have reacted to leaving Samuel with Eli in a variety of ways, Eli the priest, and I'm sure she did, though it isn't captured here. What we do see is her prayer of gratitude and dedication. But that's not all. Did you catch the theme of this prayer? It is a preview of the reversal that Jesus ushers in, a reminder that Peninnah, for all her years of taunting, was not at the top of the list or the front of the line. For God saw Hannah and heard her. God answered her, and in her faith, Hannah maintained her vow. We know that each year on their visit to the tabernacle temple, depending again on your translation, Hannah visited Samuel with a new coat that she spent the remainder of the prior year making for him. Hannah kind of disappears after that. Yet for all Samuel was to the people of Israel, for all that he did for them, his story starts not with what comes in chapter 3, which is a beautiful story of calling, by the way, not at all related to this series, but it's a great calling story. But his story doesn't start there. His story starts not with his father. His story, as it is laid out in 1 Samuel, begins with his mother, who is seen and named. Hannah, who prayed and endured and sacrificed, forever impacted by the emotional trauma and abuse at the hand and voice, and I'm sure facial expression of Peninnah, forever impacted by it all, but never defined by it. Hannah, Priscilla, Claudia, they are each integral parts in expanding Jesus's message, each in unique ways. God worked through them not despite the fact that they are women, but because they are women. God saw them as individual, created beings with their own value and worth and part in the story, their own purpose. Whether there is a current Peninnah in your life, know that you are not defined by the way that that person or people see and treat you. Instead, listen to the depths of your soul. Listen to what has been implanted within you and find that peace, because you are known and you are loved and you are valued and you have worth just as you are. That you are created as an important, intentional, purposeful part of not only your life story, but the grander story of God. In other words, you are called. You are called just as you are, because of who you are, because of who you have been created to be. You are called. I am called. Now let's start speaking. Remember, please, as we hit this halfway point, to like, comment, share, subscribe. All of those things help spread the word of this ride that we're on, and helps heal hearts that have been harmed by the church. Let's help God Redeem those voices. Redeem those who have been harmed and help them feel the truth of who they are, whose they are, and what that means for their life. Thanks for being here. See you next week.